Excellent. Well, thank you to Puerto Rico for being our sponsor of this great program. As I was saying, my name is Tyler Davidson. I am the Vice President and Chief Content Director with Meetings Today, and I'm excited to welcome you to this webinar, which is one of many that we offer. Our webinars cover a variety of topics that are very important to the meetings industry, so we hope you will join us for them all. And we also offer a number of newsletters in addition to our monthly magazine. And be sure to check us out on the web at meetingstoday.com. Today's webinar is worth 1 clock hour of credit in a strategic planning domain toward the CMP application through the Events Industry Council. To receive credit for attending this webinar, you must be present for the full hour, and upon completion of the webinar, you will be taken to the related Meetings Today Webinar Club page to obtain your credit. We encourage you to ask questions during the presentation. You may submit your questions at any time by typing your question in the designated Q&A area and then by hitting send. And should you experience any technical difficulties, please send a message in the Q&A or chat area, or just call 800-553-8878. As always, we would like to thank our sponsors today. So thanks to our sponsors, Experience Sioux Falls, the Las Vegas CVA, Meet Atlantic City, and Discover Puerto Rico. And now I would like to introduce today's panel, Michael Dominguez, who is the president and CEO of ALHI. Tori Barnes is the executive vice president of public affairs and policy with the U.S. Travel Association, Exhibition Industry Research, and then finally Kevin Bagger, the vice president of research of the Research Center at the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. Thanks for joining us. Let's start it off with Michael Dominguez. You've been following this ever since we realized what a monumental thing COVID-19 was. What are you seeing out there? Where are we at right now? And can we look forward to meeting in person sometime soon again? And did we lose Michael, maybe, perhaps? And perhaps we should start off with another columnist. Tori, are you available? Can you join in? You pick up the slack, and we'll jump over to Michael later. So thanks, Tori. What are you seeing from your perspective?
I think he's connected now. We don't want to lose him.
What's so funny is what I'm most excited about is we're going to get out of this environment that's a permanent environment right now. My apologies.
It's a heck of a way to make a point, but
seriously, right when you threw it over, my internet completely cut out, and I'm happy to say I'm sitting in a hotel lobby, Tyler, or off a hotel lobby in a meeting room at our Crescent Court in Dallas, and. Look, what you just said, I can tell you, we've seen it in the UK, we see it here in the US. We are continuously declining, even though states are continuously opening up. So we see cases dropping, and I made the comment last week, we had the lowest daily case count we have seen since March 18th of 2020, the week we shut down the country. And my only frustration was, had that been a record high, we would have seen that every hour on every news program. With a record low, we didn't hear that same exuberance about the number. And it's a real positive number, and it should tell everybody it's working. The vaccinations are working. We know that's the progress. It's important for people to get their vaccinations for those that can. And the important part is, as we see that and we see this starting to move, where I'm most encouraged is I'm seeing human behavior kick back very quickly. And there's always this thought process that how long is it going to take? And people aren't going to be comfortable. And I'm seeing the opposite of it. And I actually made this comment this week. I was watching the PGA tournament on Saturday, and it didn't occur to me until one moment that I wasn't even paying attention to it, but Mickelson on 16 hits the cup, it comes out, and you see this crowd, because the camera's right there, around the green, all moaning at one time when he missed. And the thing that stuck with me is, the Masters didn't have that. You didn't hear that kind of crowd. You didn't hear the roar of the crowd. You missed it. And what stuck with me is that fast forward 4 weeks from the Masters, people are body to body, they're without mask, and it was like it's pre-pandemic. And there is this mode that people get into very quickly. We actually had a meeting in Orlando this past week, and it was our leadership summit, and we actually had our protocol calls with our planners that were coming on Wednesday and Thursday, and then on that Friday, the CDC says you don't have to wear a mask if you're fully vaccinated. And my email blew up from planners saying, what are we doing? You just told us we're going to have to wear a mask unless we're distant. And you know what we did? We came back and said, we're going to treat everybody like adults. We have followed CDC guidance from day one at ALHI, and we've done 13 meetings even during the pandemic. And we've always followed the guidelines. So you know what the guideline was? We said the CDC says if you're fully vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. For those that from a comfort level want to, from those that haven't been vaccinated want to, please feel free to wear your mask wherever we don't have appropriate distancing. And there was nobody with a mask. Did we check for vaccinations? No. We contact traced. So we're going to go back and see what really happened after this. We had contact tracing even on the golf course and in the spa and everywhere else. We were able to monitor that, and we'll be able to see what that looks like at the end of it. What struck me was from the Thursday start till the Saturday finish, Saturday felt like it was 2019. People were conversing, the energy, the engagement, it was normal, and it felt normal, and it was quickly back to normal. That's kind of my point. Is, you know, as I've seen this start to move, I think that's an important message for people, that the human behavior, and not to get stuck on both sides. If you're really comfortable, please understand there will be some people that aren't. And if you're really uncomfortable, please realize there's some people that are very comfortable. And I think it's going to require a tremendous amount of grace by all of us in our industry to understand that and recognize it, to figure out what that's going to look like when it's all said and done. I think that's an important message. And Tyler, there's one piece that I think is important. I'm hearing more and more planners that are trying to get their stakeholders to move forward. And it's not about anything else. What we're finding is it's not about understanding the need. There's this great need. I just had a call today from a corporate planner that actually said, like, unlike a wedding, the meetings that didn't happen, we have to make up. We have to make up the content. We have to make up the purpose of them one way or another as we move into it. It doesn't mean it's going to be in its own meeting, but they've got to make up the purpose of it. And that's a nice comment to hear. They actually realize there's a purpose behind everything that they were doing, and they have to kind of bring that back. But I'm hearing more and more from stakeholders, they don't want to be first, specifically in certain industries. And that was the conversation I was having this morning. So to share one quick story to wrap this piece up is, I had a third party COO last week that actually reached out to me and said, I have a retail CEO that has a meeting in April, and he's questioning on whether he's going to sign because he doesn't want to be first. He goes, can you help? I ran a quick report for him. Between June and March, I have 289 groups in the retail sector, including the National Retail Federation that's meeting. The largest one is 4,500. And I said, if his concern is being first, he's nowhere near it. And that's the important part. But as an industry, I think it's important for us to start messaging. There's people meeting every day. And I haven't even seen the March data, but in February, we had 1.5 million group rooms in the United States. 1.5 million. And most people are thinking we're not meeting. There were meetings happening. And I think it's just going to pick up speed. We're going to run really quick.
And before we move on, I know we were talking, just right before we started the broadcast today, a lot of people are noticing airline fares going up. There's a lot of compression out there. So, the people who might be afraid of being the first, they may want to re-examine that and get their meeting in the pipeline, right? Before all the space is taken.
There's tremendous compression in the US, specifically back half of 21 into 22. And we're now seeing it bleed into 23, first 2 quarters. And what I remind everybody is we took 3 years worth of meetings, we crushed them into 2 years. And then we forget, we still had the meetings that normally would be placed 18 to 24 months out that hadn't even started searching. And that's where we're kind of getting crushed at the moment in a good way. But that's why I also am very optimistic the industry is going to bounce back very quickly from the group perspective, because we have so much compression already built into the meeting space side of it because of all the meetings that have been moved through cancellations.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael. Appreciate your thoughts on this. Let's move over to Tori Barnes, the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs and Policy with the U.S. Travel Association. Thanks for joining us today, Tori.
Thanks, Tyler, and great to be with you and with Mike and Kathy and Kevin. Always enjoy their company. I think that, the return of business travel, meetings and events is obviously absolutely critical. And quite frankly, I think without the segment, as we know, we won't really be able to get back to those 2019 numbers. But I think that a component of this that we also have to kind of think about, and this is something that we're really focused on at U.S. Travel, is the need to really open up our international borders. Obviously, international travel and international business travel specifically, incredibly lucrative. And when you combine the international inbound travel and business meetings sector, they account for over a third of all direct jobs in our industry. And we do have these inconsistent policies across the country. Some states are wide open. Some states, you have different localities or different counties even that have different gathering limitations. And we really have seen that there is more of a hesitancy from travelers, including business travelers, if they don't have clear, concise messages and understand sort of what is expected of them and what the protocols and processes are in place and what they're going to encounter through the travel to get to the event, and then what the event's going to look like. So, at U.S. Travel, along with our Meetings Mean Business Coalition and many of our other stakeholders in the industry, are really getting ready to launch a Let's Meet There campaign that's focused not only on just the importance of business meetings and events, but really on lifting these gathering limitations across the country where they still are in place, establishing clear and consistent processes, and then also really differentiating business meetings and events from mass gatherings, so that if there is a backslide as a result of moving forward and reopening more broadly, or if we're encountering a pandemic or some other kind of event like this in the future, that there's a recognition at the onset that business meetings are professional and structured events that can and are different from a mass gathering, right? I'm not saying anything against a Lollapalooza festival, but clearly a structured business meeting in a convention center is a lot different than something that's outside where there are, and or inside where there aren't these processes in place. And so we really want to make sure that we are educating not only the public health officials, but elected leaders on the local, state, and federal levels, so that they understand the economic consequences of just a hard close on this segment of the industry moving forward. So that's something that we're going to be doing in the near term, because again, you look at these international borders and the business travel needs to come here, and currently, from the UK, Canada, the EU, some of our biggest partners, they can't come here. And that's a big issue. And so we're working again aggressively with the administration on trying to reopen. The country is still subjected to 212F, which is the executive order that put those limitations or those restrictions in place, because it is important. I mean, right now we are planning still to have our IPW trade show, which is going to be held in Las Vegas. It's an international travel trade show in September. We've got very strong registration. We need to make sure that folks can come into the country. So we're really focused right now on reopening international and bringing back these business meetings and events in a sustained way. So along with the Let's Meet There campaign that I mentioned, that's in collaboration with Meetings Mean Business and our industry partners, we're focused on 2 white papers that are going to be coming soon. One we're working on with the Ohio State University, one with Harvard. And really the point here is, again, to differentiate these structured professional business meetings and events from mass gatherings, ensure a consistent reopening of these gathering limitations across the country, and then also focus, and the Harvard paper will do this, on the disproportionate impact that women and minorities have had economically with these business meetings being so locked down and these gathering limitations being so stringent in so many places for so long. So there'll be a groundswell, really, we are hoping, of grassroots engagement throughout our industry. And in addition to meeting these public health officials and these elected officials that we're targeting, it's also those C-suite executives, right? Those folks making the decisions on whether or not people are going to be coming back to the office and whether or not people are going to, as Mike noted, be the first one out there or not. And how do we make sure that folks do feel that they are in a position to do that. So a lot of good work. We are optimistic, but we really think that this is also an opportunity to level set elected leaders across this country on how important this segment is. So while we may be able to start to reopen in a more robust way, we want to keep the pressure on and highlight these important economic considerations for anything that may happen in the future.
Great, thank you, Tori. And that is a very important distinction too, the difference between business meetings and some big music festival. I know the big first thing I'm going to do is New Orleans Jazz Fest, so I'm going to jump right into that. I'm looking forward, but that's a little different than, say, going to PCMA or MPI. So thank you, and thanks for all the great work you and U.S. Travel is doing, lobbying and representing the industry. Let's jump over to Kathy Breeden, the CEO for the Center for Exhibition Industry Research. That's a fantastic barometer of where we're at, because those are typically very large events with exhibits and such. So Kathy, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tyler, and thanks for having me here today. And of course, hello, Michael and Tori and Kevin. It's nice to see each of you. I look forward to seeing you in person. I attended my first in-person conference several weeks ago. And Michael, you were absolutely right. We had stickers if we'd been vaccinated, and it said that we were vaccinated. And people were very respectful. You asked beforehand, may I give you a hug if you saw that they had a vaccinated sticker. But I think, by the end of the meeting, it was just really interesting to watch the human behavior of all of us that have been collectively, just in our own little rooms for over a year, and then seeing all of us in the industry coming together again, and how excited we all were to see one another. The Center for Exhibition Industry Research, all we do is conduct research on the B2B exhibitions industry and some B2C as well. And what we know is that in 2019, the trade show industry contributed $101 billion to US GDP. Last year, we were forecasted to contribute $105 billion. Unfortunately, it went down to $24 billion, and that was only because that there were a couple of very large events that were able to be held in January and February of last year. So, certainly, as we know, everything was canceled until, Q3, Q4. A couple of shows were able to get off of the ground, and states like Florida and here in Texas and in Indiana, and show organizers had to pivot very quickly, just like all of us did, in launching our own digital events. And it was very difficult in terms of creating a marketplace that would be viable, where the exhibitors felt like they were getting the ROI from participating. And, up until now, we have not seen that is the case, that the exhibitors did not realize the ROI. They lacked the leads that they normally get at a face-to-face event. There was also the challenge of, creating that brand awareness, and how do you set yourself apart from other exhibitors. Also, the digital event platforms, they were all very new as well, and making sure that you can get the data and the metrics that, especially the organizers need to report back to their exhibitors following the event. So lots of challenges. And certainly I think that moving forward, technology is going to improve. These digital platforms are going to get more sophisticated, and be able to provide the information that the organizers are going to need. But there's still a lot of tension and unknown around what that marketplace might look like, because it really isn't, it isn't a trade show. It's an online digital marketplace, and what that might look like, I think any of us are still, trying to figure that out. But some organizers are launching a 365-day marketplace, which is something that SEER Research had told us years ago, that the exhibitors were looking at connecting to their customers year round. So we're seeing some of that. We are also seeing that organizers are going to continue with digital into 2022, just to be able to protect that asset that is their show. Many shows have now gone 2 years without having held that live event. And especially for associations, that's very difficult, right? Because many associations get 40, 60, 80% of their annual revenue from that one event every year. So that is also something that's going to, need to kind of shake out over the next year. But the good news from SEER's economist is that he was saying that by the end of 2022, GDP is just going to be down it'll be about 4.5%. And in terms of B2B exhibitions, we're just going to be down by 10% over 2019. So what this means is that the recovery is going to be much, much faster than what it was from the Great Recession that took us 10 years to recover from. That just 2019 was the first year that we had recovered. So, lots of really good news there. Also, we're going to be watching SEER's launching an omni-channel marketing study, where we're going to be surveying both exhibitors and attendees, kind of looking at where those exhibitors, how did they connect with their customers during this period of time when trade shows were paused? And are those marketing tactics going to continue? Where's the trade show channel going to fall into these marketing tactics? Attendees, they've connected with these companies as well in a different type of way. What's that look like going forward? Where's the marketing spend? How's that going to shift? So we're launching that study very shortly, and those results will be released in September. So looking forward to that. But all in all, really good news for the trade show industry. We're all looking forward to getting back to face-to-face. I'll be in Las Vegas for World of Concrete, and I'm very excited to be there. Normally I'm in Las Vegas several times a year, and I have a very quick meeting after with MPI there. So coming back strong.
Well, excellent. Thank you, Kathy. And I'm glad you brought up World of Concrete, because that's big news. And as we transition over to Kevin over at the LVCVA, big news for Las Vegas. It's a big show at the expanded convention center, and get to show that off. So let's kick it over to Kevin right now. What are you seeing in Las Vegas? And tell us more about this World of Concrete that I believe is going to kick off June 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great segue. Yeah, we are very excited to host World of Concrete next week. Actually, June 8th through the 10th is when it'll be here. They're setting up right now in our brand new West Hall. Our West Hall, in fact, this evening, we're having our official grand opening of the West Hall expansion, which is a 1.4 million square foot addition to our convention center. So we're very, very excited to show that off. If you were back a year ago, obviously we were all in a very different headspace, and where we were having to figure out if we were even going to be able to finish our construction of our facility. We did. We pushed through. In fact, we made lemons out of lemonade as best we could, as far as our building was empty. So we were able to actually get a lot of things done faster with during that time frame, which was good. We're also going to be showing off, while we're talking about the convention center, we're also going to be showing off the Boring Company, the new underground transportation system we have that was developed with Elon Musk's Boring Company, the first one of its kind, which is also pretty cool as well. And we got neon. It's Vegas, so we have to make sure it's a Vegas experience. But it's been interesting as we've been looking out over the past year and where we are now. Obviously, conventions came to a grinding halt. We've all been doing this virtual thing. And we did some research back in January just to find out what is the headspace of business travelers and convention attendees, to find out, finding out basically, am I the only one who's sick of these Zoom calls, or are other people feeling that way too? And luckily what it highlighted was like 6 out of 10 people definitely were just burnt out with Zoom. And that was back in January. So that's only gotten worse as we've had to endure this another few months. And then we asked people simply, do you prefer face-to-face? Do you prefer Zoom? And 9 out of 10, if asked, prefer face-to-face. I mean, they want to, we're humans. We want to be connected with people. And it's really highlighted in our sort of our day-to-day interaction with our hotel stakeholders and so forth. And I think Informa put this really well in one of their numerous webinars they've done through this, was that they highlighted that virtual increases reach, but live increases depth. And I think that really highlights the ability to connect with people, not just intellectually to learn things in your industry, but as far as to just build relationships. During all of this thing, I was just sort of thinking about myself through all of the past year. I've maintained my relationships with the people I already knew, whether it was through at work, whether it was in the industry, but I've met almost nobody new virtually. It's very difficult to connect with people, to network virtually. And that's where obviously these conventions and meetings all matter. That's where their role is truly important, whether it's building relationships for actual business kind of transactions and contracts, but just networking to learn about what's going on. And things are actually looking pretty good. I'm echoing the sentiment that everyone on the panel has talked about as far as we are reawakening. Things are very, very exciting. We're in sort of a weird place where we're going to be recovering, like as you started out with this with World of Concrete. It'll be here. Obviously, it won't be as big as it normally would be. They're the first show out of the gate, and they're going to be smaller than they normally would be, but they're still going to have a lot of the key experiences that they would have during their show. And we've been learning along with them side by side as we've been going through the various health professionals and protocols to make sure that they do the show right with expectations that are changing sort of day by day, week by week. We've been working with them on questions like, anyone who's been to World of Concrete, they have this really fun bricklaying contest. As a spectator, it's pretty incredible to watch. And they had questions like, are the guys supposed to wear masks during that? And it's an example, well, I don't know. We got to find the answer to that. So we did find the answer, and they don't have to wear them. It's outdoors. But as far as, that's just one of 1,000 questions that we've been working on with our clients to figure out how to make those shows happen. But at the convention center alone, we've got something like 45 shows booked between now and the end of 2021. And we're hearing really positive feedback up at the shows in the latter months of the year. NAB is going to be happening, and they're hearing very positive things. The SEMA aftermarket auto show that we host, they're hearing very positive things about registrations prior to the event. So things are absolutely positively going in the right direction. And 2022 is really going to be very strong. The feedback we're getting from our hotel partners, whether it's MGM or Las Vegas Sands, Caesars Entertainment, they just in one of their Wall Street calls just this week talked about how they're seeing 30% year-over-year increases in their group room nights for the latter months of this year, and that's over 2019. So we are in a period where we're going to be transitioning. There's going to be some hiccups along the way as we all sort of get through this sort of recovery period. But later part of the year and into 2022, we do expect to see some healthy improvements on the group side. Leisure, of course, is very strong right now. We are having very strong weekends. Memorial Day weekend is coming up, and it's going to be effectively a sellout weekend for Las Vegas. We're going to be hosting upwards of 300,000 visitors in the destination. So the leisure side is absolutely filling in the weekends, but the midweek, until the group can come back to the level it needs to, we need that group to happen. And it'll be a few months where it's going to be gradual, but we are excited to see that coming on the latter part of 2021 and into 2022.
Well, great. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, and I know I just wrote a story about Las Vegas, and compression is a very real issue there, right? I mean, I kind of think it's always been my opinion, if we haven't been meeting for a year and a couple months maybe, and if I'm an organization, when I kick off my in-person gathering again, I want to go to some place like Las Vegas, right? I mean, that has everything going for it. So you are seeing a lot of compression there, and
we're seeing that.
And what does it look like? What's the calendar look like going a couple of years out?
Yeah, the rates are definitely getting stronger the latter part of the year, and also, I mean, they sort of interlink with things that are going on in Vegas, because we also have a brand new shiny NFL stadium that got finished last summer, but then we didn't get to have people in it. So we have a lot of the NFL games, and I saw last week we were looking at a thing that the best-selling games in the NFL right now. Number one is the Bucs against the Pats, and we all know why that is. But then the next four after that are all the Raiders home games, because people want to come out and check out the new Allegiant Stadium because it's in Vegas. So to your point on rate compression, that is definitely going to affect the rates on the weekends, and that bleeds into the Monday nights is when the groups start coming in. So they all fit together. So the point being, yeah, rate compression will gradually occur and is occurring in the latter fall months of the year.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Well, let's just sort of go around the panel. And I did send some questions to everyone before. And, maybe just we'll start off with Mike. What has this whole calamity, this whole chaotic period taught you? And what do you think all of us should have learned from this pandemic period?
Wow, it's I think there's a lot of silver linings, and I hope more than anything, for me, I've had an appreciation for our industry and a love for our industry. I think you don't truly know how much you need and love something until it's fully taken away from you. And for us to not be able to have the human engagement that we actually take for granted, I think is probably one of the best. I think it's going to be one of the best outcomes to come out of this. I've seen it firsthand when people are engaging. It is something not only they've missed, you can tell the appreciation. And from a personal experience, I surprised my mother on Mother's Day, and we were talking about that briefly on this call, but I surprise her. I pull up in the driveway. She comes to the car. She gives me a hug, and she steps back, looks at me, and gives me a hug and doesn't let go. And you realize, and she said, it's the first time she's hugged me like that in a year. Now, we saw her a few times, but we stayed as far away from her as possible during that time frame for her own good. But I see that even in our industry, that the need for the human connection and human engagement. I hope it makes us a little bit kinder. And I say that from all of us that, Tyler, you've heard me say this before. We all need reading glasses as we get older because your lens hardens in your eye. There's no way to avoid it. I think the longer we've been in an industry, our lens tends to harden the way we look at our industry. We become really self-critical. We care more about what was served at the mill. And as a meeting professional, I would have never picked that instead of enjoying the engagement. And, it's me growing up a good Catholic kid. We used to always laugh at anybody who was criticizing somebody that the priest messed up on a word or it wasn't smooth. I go, you weren't listening to the message. It was the message we should be paying attention to. And to me, that's my greatest thing. I do see it. And I do think we're going to have a tremendous amount of grace for each other coming out of this. And I hope it maintains, because we tend to get into old habits really quickly. I hope we have an appreciation for what was taken away from us through this time frame.
Thank you, Michael. And Tori, what have you learned as a professional and your perspective? And, how do we not go through this ordeal again, especially, on the government level? Hopefully we have procedures or methods in place to where we can combat this better next time.
Yeah, I definitely think we've learned a lot. I think the folks in the government have learned a lot. I think that there is definitely an awareness and a need for preparation and for kind of taking a lot of these important lessons and knowing that we need to have a plan. We need to have a plan to be able to continue to have meetings and events. We need a plan that is more consistent as we welcome back international travelers. We need a plan that's consistent on who can go up to Capitol Hill and have meetings, for example. So, there's definitely, I think, a lot of lessons learned. I agree, though, with Mike in that, there is a lot of, I think, positive outcomes that will be realized. And I think that really that inability to get together, the inability to share, and I think, a lot of folks say we're never going to go back to the way that things were. I don't know that I totally agree with that. Maybe we're not going to travel around the world for, you know, a 3-hour meeting. Okay, fine. Maybe we can do that via Zoom, right? But like everything else, I really think that once, you know, to Mike's point, you know, back with your mom, I mean, I was unfortunately, and not to be morbid, at a funeral yesterday, and you know, there was so much happiness in being able to celebrate together the person that we all loved so much and cared about. And when you think about, you know, that even from a business meetings and events perspective, how much more you get done when you're in person. You know, you know, I've had my team on the policy side come over and get together in my backyard because, you know, we're outside. It's just easier to talk about policy and work through things that we need to get done when we're together in a room or together outside. So I do think that there is going to be that appreciation. And so, yeah, there may be some Zooms in the future, but people are also sick of Zooms. I don't know about y'all, but I've been doing as many conference calls lately as possible because it's either I want to be with you in person or, yeah, I'm happy to talk to you. But, you know, we've got to get back to the way that maybe not exactly the way that things were, but mostly. And I do think that there is that appreciation and that excitement to get back out there. And it just takes one time, one engagement, and you're hooked, right? So, you know, I think that will be hopefully, you know, to Mike's initial points that he made, you know, we've got to get more folks vaccinated. We want to really continue to urge people to do that. And then when it comes around to if you've got to get a booster, get your booster and let's keep going in the right direction. So I think that we'll be together more frequently, more quickly. And I think that hopefully we don't forget how difficult it was to not be together so that we can continue the positive parts of the work that we do going forward.
Right. Thank you, Tori. And I'll let everyone else out there know too. Send in some questions if you have them for our panelists. And let's move over to Kathy. What has this whole thing taught you?
Well, certainly, you know, echoing what Tori and Michael have said, you know, it's the power of face-to-face and that it just can't be duplicated via Zoom. I think even Tori just said it with her team, trying to do any type of strategizing on Zoom is very, very difficult to do, and bringing your teams together, it's really hard, and at least from my experience, if not impossible. And I find that, you know, you tend to ask too many people to the Zoom calls rather than just the key people that are absolutely needed. And then it just goes off to, you know, this other area that doesn't need to go to. But anyway, I think also one of the things that I have found that is very beneficial is I think all of us, all the different associations have come together and collaborated so very closely this last year. And, you know, competitive companies coming together to work together to try and move things forward. So I think both of those are very positive. I'm excited that the Exhibitions and Conferences Alliance effort has gotten underway. We've always felt that, you know, trade shows have been the invisible industry, even though it does contribute so much to GDP. And, you know, MMB has done a great job. US Travel has done a great job, but we just needed to have our really our own voice. And moving that forward, I think, you know, I participated in US Travel's Destination Capitol Hill and had some Zoom meetings with, you know, some of the congressional representatives, and they were really, really hard to do. First off, you didn't know who was going to show up on them, right? And then you were surprised who were, so you just had to really be prepared for it. So I think again, it just reaffirms the really the impact and value of face-to-face and people coming together and seeing one another and conducting business in that format, which I think pushes that business forward faster.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. Kevin, you represent probably the biggest destination in the U.S. For meetings and conventions. What has this whole thing taught you?
Well, I think it's for Vegas specifically, there's one thing we've done research on this in the past, even pre-COVID, but it highlighted for Vegas, one of the key things about Vegas, whether it's a business trip or a leisure trip, it's the energy of Vegas is sort of the intangible, unique selling proposition of Vegas is when you are in Vegas, you feel the energy, and that energy relies on people. So when people aren't here, Vegas isn't Vegas. It just isn't. Vegas is not a place that works when it is quiet, when it is dull. So what feeds off of itself in Vegas is people, and people physically being here. That's because our economy demands it, but as far as it's genuine, as far as meetings and conventions are successful in Vegas because people are here to be awake and alive and innovative and want to think and want to connect. So this sort of reinforced something that we kind of knew already, but it just made it so in such stark relief. It's weird when we were all sort of forced to live in this virtual world for a year that none of us could have ever thought that would ever happen. It highlighted exactly how important one-on-one is for everything that everyone on the panel has said, as far as meeting new people, strategizing in a way that you just can't. Like all of you, I'm sure I've had daily calls with my staff and my coworkers, and we have figured it out. We managed to get work done. We're sharing files and sharing screens and all of that, but it just isn't the same. It's not as efficient when you just want to sort of brainstorm. It's hard to brainstorm when you have 6 screens that you're looking at and everyone's interrupting each other. You don't have to, in face-to-face, I don't have the fear of forgetting to unmute myself or my face freezing as I'm talking to you. All of those things thankfully go out the window. Exactly, Mike. We have learned exactly, and it's not, thankfully, just not me convincing myself of this. Our own research and our meeting and business attendees echo it, that people, they need face-to-face. Now, that being said, we know that it's not gonna go back to exactly the normal, like Tori said. Certain meetings we've figured out actually are more efficient. You know, this virtual thing does work for certain kinds of connections, certain kinds of business purposes. But for those things where you really need to learn from other people and connect with people, business meetings and conventions still are very important. And I just have to get the plug in there. We have 14 million square feet of space in Las Vegas, and Caesars Forum and Aria just expanded their space, and Wynn just expanded their space. So we have the ability to host any conceivable type of meeting, whatever you may want to have.
Well, all right. Well, thank you, Kevin. Had a couple questions come in about proof of vaccination. That seems to be what everyone's talking about right now. Are you noticing that? And I'll just throw it out to anyone on the panel. Are you noticing that happening? Do you expect more airlines, meeting facilities to require proof of vaccination? And if so, how long do you think this period will last?
I'll start on one side of it, Tyler, is I think proof of a vaccination to make it easier to do something and avoid testing is probably going to be in play, at least for a short period of time. Here in the US specifically, having a vaccination prove to be the qualifier to do something, I don't see. It will make it easier for, and I say that because and I love when we talk about liability, everybody talks about HIPAA. It's not about HIPAA. If I give you my information, I'm not breaking any HIPAA law. But there is ADA law you will be violating because certain people can't take a vaccine for a variety of health reasons. And you would now be discriminating against an audience for somebody who can't control it. You also look at, a civil liberties dispute for people that have a conscientious objection to vaccines, whether it's a religious belief or another belief system, and that's protected under constitutional law. So the more I've read about that and heard that, I keep saying that that's just not feasible here in the US. That's a US centric view. Internationally, yeah, I mean, you're seeing it already. And I know Tori can talk to this much more as far as what those discussions are. But we're seeing it in meetings that it's going to be more for ease. And I really do believe, like, if we get to the point that we're about to get to, we're about 6 weeks away from the CDC having to remove the epidemic status from the pandemic. And the reason that's important is then it's like any other illness that we have in the US on a daily basis. And that's a big change for us. And I think at that point, it means you are at that herd immunity. And that's the one that there was a great article. It was an op-ed in the Washington Post by Johns Hopkins doctor that his frustration was herd immunity is not vaccinating 75% of the population. It's 75% of the population being vaccinated and or having the antibodies because they had the virus. And we're going to get there. And the point is that's where you lose the epidemic spread. And we're going to get there with 60% of US adults already being vaccinated and 50% of our population already being vaccinated. The CDC's estimate is it's 3-to-1, which means the 30 million cases we know of, they anticipate there were 90 million cases of COVID in the US based on their RN modeling, which means add 90 million to the 130 million we've already vaccinated fully, you're at the 200 million. So I just think this goes away. I've joked that by the time we figure it out, this will be over, this argument. But in short-term international travel, I think it's going to be there. And again, I know Tori can talk to that much more.
Yeah, Tori, what's your take on this?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've been all along saying that, folks should get vaccinated. We encourage folks to get vaccinated. We see it as an important additional layer, obviously, of all the health and safety protocols that we know that our industry's already put forward. And I agree with Mike very much on international in particular, because we have an inbound testing requirement right now. So you can't come to the US, even you can't come back as an American without proof of a test within 72 hours. So with that in place, from a facilitation and an ease perspective, it really does make a lot of sense. We would agree that there should be if you're vaccinated, you can forego the test, and in that case, I do think that there would be a requirement to demonstrate that you have indeed received a vaccine. Right now, the federal government has said that they are not putting this requirement on the digital health credentials or vaccine passports, which we don't like because that does imply mandatory uptake of that. But they have not put forward federal guidelines and or standards, which we do think is really, really important. So we've been pressing on the administration to do that because, again, of the requirements. So I agree that in the U.S., I don't see this. It would be a state-by-state issue. We already know that Governor DeSantis of Florida is not allowing these types of things to move forward. So we're gonna, we run the risk here in the U.S. of having sort of that patchwork. Again, if certain businesses choose to do that, that's up to them to do. We don't think they should be a requirement, but internationally, it's going to make a lot of sense. And I think, just to add on to Mike's point there, one of the things we've been saying on trying to reopen international has really been, to the point that once you get to that certain point from a vaccination standpoint and or, the folks that have the antibodies, we shouldn't be looking even at a country by country type of approach to reopening. It should be if you're vaccinated and or you have a negative test, then you should be able to come into the US. And once we're at that certain population here, the risk to the US citizens is very, 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 very low. And the science tells us that. So, we think that, again, for the now, we'd like to see more standards so that we can open up this international piece. But domestically, I think it'll be, here and there for some period of time.
Right. Thank you, Tori. Well, we're getting near a little bit to the end of the program, so I'm going to kind of just throw out one more question and maybe just go around the panel, and we'll start with Kevin. As we've been through this whole experience, we've all of us have had to transition to virtual meetings. We've seen, meeting and event planners jump in and do virtual meetings and, and all the different, things that are involved with that, and really learn to master that. What do you think through this whole experience will become a permanent fixture of meetings and events moving forward?
Yeah,
Kevin?
I think the as I've sort of talked to my sales peers as well as the meeting planner that we talked to, I think the big thing is that the really big shift in mindset for a lot of meeting planners, and particularly large meetings and trade show producers, is more of a mindset that your association or entity can no longer get away with one or maybe two major conferences a year. I really think that the mindset is it is going to be a year-round effort to maintain a relationship with your members or your attendees. So as opposed to it just being the big show or maybe the big two shows of the year, interspersed with maybe a dozen or more webinars or virtual meetings to connect to focus on content areas. I think that that's a thing that I am observing and reading about, is that associations and trade show producers can no longer rely on just one key event a year. I think it is going to be more virtual things interspersed with hybrid, interspersed with the big major event every year. I think that's the thing. I don't think that's going to revert back to the old way. I think that's going to be kind of the new way of doing things with meeting planners and trade show producers.
Great, thank you. Kathy, is really, and specifically with the exhibition industry, what do you think is going to stick with us in the future that we've experienced in the last year?
Well, I think, echoing what Kevin just said, I believe that the events are probably going to be smaller, especially in the short term. Hopefully they'll come back to the size where they were. We don't know yet about our exhibitors going to come back and exhibit at the number of shows that they have exhibited at in the past. If they have taken a show out of rotation, are they going to question whether, there was enough ROI from not having attended that show, where they might not add that back into their rotation. So I think, that's something to watch very closely, but also I do think also that there's going to be some type of digital element that will continue, as it relates to the education portion of the event. We just have to wait and see on what that digital marketplace will look like and play out in the future. But as of right now, I see that exhibitors are getting so much more ROI out of that physical event. And if they are participating in the digital event, then they may not necessarily want to exhibit. They may want to sponsor an education program. They want to position themselves as thought leaders. So they don't want to just slap their logo up someplace. They want a much more larger presence in that digital event. And that may or may not include being an exhibitor at that digital event.
Very fascinating, Kathy. Thank you for your observations. Tori, what do you think? What are we going to is going to be part of the landscape moving forward?
Well, I think that, much like what Kevin and Kathy have said, that there's some of these sort of expanded virtual experiences that will continue to be part of the work. And but I don't think that I see some of the bigger things, going away. I think that they come back and they come back to stay. I think in a lot of the work that we do from an advocacy standpoint in particular, and the meetings and events that we have in and around Washington or state capitals throughout the country, there really is, no really replacement for those in-person engagements, especially when you look at, elected officials and the timeframe for which they may represent a constituency. So, it's really important to get in there and to build those relationships, to make sure that we're educating folks around the importance of the industry and all of the sectors, in particular now, as we've learned, the business meetings and event sectors. So, I think that that for sure, we'll have some more virtual experiences, but at least in the advocacy work that we do, and I expect in the broader industry that the in-person is gonna be necessary to enhance relationship building for the long run.
Great, thank you, Tori. And Mike, we'll end it with you. And I think this is probably the most relevant question to you. What is going to be part of the landscape moving forward? All the health and safety protocols in hotels and meeting facilities, hybrid meetings. What's your take on it?
A couple of things. I saw the note on the protocols in the hotels. I thought it was important to remind everybody, hotels have always been clean. Health and safety has always been number one for us. And during the pandemic, we didn't go from 50% and improve 50% of the process. We improved 10 to 15. And cleaning for an airborne pathogen is different than any cleaning we've had to do in the past. And I just think that's an important reference. Are we going to keep fogging? Absolutely. Are we going to keep wiping everything and be real cognizant? Absolutely. And our hand sanitizer station's going to be there. We've invested in them. They're staying. So they're going to be around for a long period of time. Those are all just really good things. And I really do hope that it makes a flu season less impactful for us as we move down the road. As far as hybrid, I have two messages, Tyler. One's about hybrid and one's overarching, but I keep telling people not to overthink this. I'm glad the rest of the industry is caught up to the largest tech companies in the world that have been doing hybrid for a decade. And what we did was fast forward an adoption curve, and that's good for our industry. That's not a criticism, because we never had the time, the money, and if there's anything that came out of this, there's so many suppliers now of different type of hybrid solutions that the cost is now effective. It was always very cost prohibitive, except for some of the largest companies, and competition brings cost down. So we have enough competition that has happened in this environment. And a message I've given to everybody is to not make definitives. And Tori mentioned this earlier. I have a saying of, right now it's important to be decisively indecisive, but please don't make any definitives as far as what we think the world's going to look like forever. And I keep hearing this. I'm like, stop. Let's let the dust settle. And I concur with Corey. And the best example I can give to people, I was in my work life when the towers came down on 9/11, and we sat here as an industry and said it was going to change our industry forever. Except for my TSA experience, nothing has changed 2 decades later. And I think sometimes we overestimate this long-term impact over demand shocks. And I think it's just prudent for us to pause. Let's see where it all settles, and then start to make some determinations of what it means long-term.
Well, great. Thanks, Mike. And thank you, Tori and Kathy and Kevin, for joining us today. Great discussion we had. And as we close out the presentation, there's just a few important pieces of information we'd like to share with everyone. Be sure to join us on June 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern for Strategic Negotiating in the Post-Shutdown World, presented by Robin Mikowitz. That'll be great. She is very thorough about negotiating, so that's going to be a great presentation. So we hope you can join us for that. And then also available on our website, you will find a vault of information at your convenience. And then, as always, we would like to thank our sponsors today. So thanks to Experience Sioux Falls, the Las Vegas CVA, Meet Atlantic City, and Discover Puerto Rico. Upon completion of this webinar, you will be redirected to today's related webinar club page. Each webinar has its own unique webinar club page where you can download the presentation, view the webinar on demand, obtain your CMP credit certificate, and so much more. Today's webinar club page is located at meetingstoday.com/webinar-club-industry-updates. And if you're not automatically redirected, you may also visit our website at meetingstoday.com, and then just hover over the webinars tab in the navigation and click on the webinar club in the drop-down menu, and then just select your choice. So thanks again to our panelists and to all of you for joining us for this webinar today. Have a great rest of the day, and we hope to see you again on the road, hopefully soon. So take care, everyone.